I mean, I was told by my film professor, there are films and there are movies. And sometimes you've got to know what you're walking into.
Yeah. See, but I come from a time when movies were films.
I feel like a lot's happened since we last talked. Yeah, sure, there was probably just a lot that happened in the world of movies and the world of TV. Some new stuff probably got announced, some new trailers probably came out, but the biggest thing that happened was that it was my 20th birthday. I turned 20 years old, 20 years of life on this earth, so much to experience, so many just love and laughter, a lot of movies and a lot of TV, most importantly. Movies are really just one of the biggest parts of my entire life. I wouldn't really be here without them. I love them more than I can even explain or put into any words in the human dictionary. And I feel like I always get asked the question, as someone who watches a lot of movies, what's your favorite movie? That's the question that I always dread being asked, because I don't have a favorite movie. It hits a point when you watch so many movies, about a movie a day, 2 movies a day, it just turns into, you don't have a favorite movie. I just have favorites, a lot of favorites, over 100, over 1,000 favorite movies. And, that's what I have for you today. I picked 20 of my favorite movies that I just knew were pound for pound some of my favorites of all time. That sounds a lot easier on paper, but I soon realized there's just too many movies in the world for me to condense into just 20. This was a lot harder than I thought it would be, and it was just a true challenge and a true test of what I could do. But surprisingly, I did it. I have for you today 20 of my favorite movies of all time. I'm going to present these to you in alphabetical order. And just to be clear, favorite movies don't equal the greatest of all time. Favorites don't equal best by any means. Some of these, I will admit, are some of the greatest films to ever exist, but others are just some of my personal favorites, some comfort movies, some movies that are just averaging like 2 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd, but I still enjoy them, and I'll watch them any day of the week. But before we begin, like I said, there was a lot of films that just got snubbed out of this top 20. A lot of my favorite films I just couldn't find a way to squeeze in here, or they just didn't feel right to fit inside of this top 20. That being said, they're still some of my favorites of all time. So before we dive in, here's some honorable mentions that I have that I truly love, but just couldn't find a place in here. The first honorable pick, Richard Linklater, The Before Trilogy. This is one of the greatest romance films ever made and one of the best trilogies of all time, easily in the top 5. One of the best screenplays ever written, some of the best acting you'll ever see on the big screen, and just some of the best chemistry in film ever. And this is truly Richard Linklater's masterpiece. This entire trilogy is a 10 out of 10. Even though I am a certified film bro, The Dark Knight Trilogy did not sneak its way into this list. The Dark Knight Trilogy is really cliche for a lot of favorites of all time. Obviously, The Dark Knight Trilogy is up there with my top favorites of all time, but I didn't want to put it in here. It's too obvious, it's too cliche. You've seen it 1,000 times. In any favorite list, The Dark Knight Trilogy is there. I didn't want to put it in here, but I still love it. 2 of the biggest franchises of all time, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. They didn't sneak in here. These movies, I love both of these respectively. Lord of the Rings and Star Wars respectively have a massive impact on just how much I love sci-fi and fantasy films. But I didn't get into these films until later in life, so they don't have that big of an effect on me. I still love them, but they just didn't find a way in here. And also one of my glorious kings and favorite directors of all time, Martin Scorsese. Not one of his films found a way into this list. I still love him, and he still has an incredible filmography, but he just couldn't find a way to sneak in here. Maybe next time I'll dive into a film specifically from Scorsese to give him a little bit more love. But that's really it for honorable mentions. It's really hard to do this. I mean, there's so many films I'm leaving out right now. Over the Hedge, Meet the Robinsons, Sing Street. I can go on forever. There's too many movies that I love so much. Licorice Pizza, Paul Thomas Anderson. Phantom Thread, Paul Thomas Anderson. In the Mood for Love, Park Chan-wook. I love movies, and this list of 20 films will never be able to do my love of film justice by any means. But until then, I'll stop all my yapping and dive into this top 20. All right, before we start one more time, this list is going to be in alphabetical order. There's no bias or judgment over any of the other films. I love all of these films somewhat equally. That's a very vague equally. It's like a parent saying they love all their children. They have their favorite, but they just don't want to say it. I love all these films equally, but wink, wink. Let's dive into it. All right, starting off our list, I have 2001: A Space Odyssey. This film is truly science fiction perfected. No film has come close to what 2001: A Space Odyssey has done in over 30 years. It's really never going to be topped by anyone. Christopher Nolan came close with Interstellar, but in my opinion, 2001 still reigns supreme as the best sci-fi film ever made. But Interstellar and 2001, respectively, both of them I give 5 out of 5, and I love them both for different reasons. Both their stories are different for different reasons, and 2001, in my opinion, is just a better movie. I love both of them, but 2001 all day. Stanley Kubrick is just an absolute mastermind, and even after like 30, 40 years, we're still debating about what the ending means and what it all just is. It's just beautiful. It's so much depth to it. I just can never get enough of it. After that, in alphabetical order, The Amazing Spider-Man 2012. I'll admit, this is not the best Spider-Man film. It's not even the best superhero film, but The Amazing Spider-Man is my Spider-Man film. Andrew Garfield is my Spider-Man. I'll admit, Tobey is just a better Spider-Man overall, but this is truly my movie. I remember seeing this movie like it was yesterday. I know every single minute detail about that theater experience like it was yesterday, and I just really just can never get enough of this film. The score, the acting, the suit, the web swinging, the chemistry between Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield. This film is truly everything to me. I can never get enough of it. I'll admit this movie objectively isn't the best in the world, but every time I watch a movie, I always think to myself in the back of my head, I just want to watch The Amazing Spider-Man right now. I don't care about this movie. I just want to watch TASM 1 one more time, but I know I can't. I have to watch more movies, but still, The Amazing Spider-Man has a chokehold on my love of movies, and it always will. Number 3, once again in alphabetical order, is The Avengers from 2012. Another showing. I remember every single minute detail about this showing in the back of my head. One of my favorite theater experiences of all time. I'll admit, The Avengers probably like in top 10 for the MCU, but without the Avengers working, the MCU just really wouldn't work. I know that, Iron Man really did it all, but the Avengers, nothing really had ever been done like this before, which is what made it so revolutionary and also just so important that it worked. So yeah, it's not the best MCU film, but we wouldn't really have the MCU without it. I know Iron Man's really that movie, but, the Avengers is just better, in my opinion. It also, for better or for worse, changed Hollywood as we know it, which can be a really good thing or a really bad thing, depending on who you ask. But, The Avengers, 2012, still always one of my favorites of all time. Number 4, I have Blade Runner 2049 from 2017. This movie and this whole franchise is, I think, one of the best pieces of fiction ever to exist on this earth. I love both of these films, The Final Cut and 2049 respectively, but 2049, I think, just builds on the first one so much more that it just immediately surpasses the first one by a long shot. Not only does it star Ryan Gosling, literally me, but one of my favorite actors of all time, it is really, I think, just so good because of its story and its themes. Truly just one of the best movies just dealing with what it means to be human and purpose and how you go about living your life. It's so just deep, so much depth to its themes, and truly incredible visuals. Hans Zimmer just kills it with the score. It's already a cult classic. It's just one of those few movies from the 21st century that I can just confidently admit this movie is a classic, has a big cult following on social media, and for rightfully so reason, this movie is just absolutely exquisite. Somehow it didn't get 5 stars for me. I definitely got to rewatch this movie and just dive into it a very deep ton. But yeah, Blade Runner 2049, if you haven't seen it already, you're definitely missing out. Number 5 is a movie that I watched last month for the very first time at Cinema Paradiso. This is really every film bro's favorite movie of all time, and rightfully so. This movie is just truly everything, and as a person who loves movies and just grew up loving these films and going to the theater, it just means so much to me that this film is good and that it just works so well. A bit recently, I noticed that the way you test to know if you really love a movie is by asking yourself, is any movie doing what this film does? And most likely the answer is no if you think it's just absolutely perfect. And Cinema Paradiso is exactly that. This movie is just everything to me. I love it so much. Even after seeing it less than a month ago, it means the world to me. Number 6, a little bit controversial, Diary of Wimpy Kid 2010. Is this movie exactly good? No, but I read all these books growing up. I watched all the films growing up. It just had a chokehold on my life, and I just absolutely love this movie. This first one is truly extremely well crafted. Is it objectively good? No, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's absolutely trash, but I still love it. It has a personal place in my heart, and it always will. Now for number 7, I had to throw in a little bit of Steven Spielberg, and I was really close to throwing in Jurassic Park. I mean, Jurassic Park is really his masterpiece, but recently, I got a chance to rewatch E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and I can confidently say E.T. is just so much better than Jurassic Park. And this is coming from someone who was for a long time a Jurassic Park diehard fan, but E.T. is just so much better to me. It's just so much of a smaller story, which makes it so much better. And just on a rewatch, I just noticed that there was just some little details just surrounding the characters that we see in the film, their personal lives, they kind of bleed into the movie and bleed into this sci-fi world, this big sci-fi spectacle. He finds a way to make it just intimate. And that's what I think makes this movie so good. Just even years after it came out, it makes it just so much more relevant and hits so much closer to home every time I watch it. It never gets old. It's truly special. There's a lot of movies that you can consider to be Steven Spielberg's masterpiece. Jaws, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, the list goes on. He's just truly, if there was any director who I can say is my favorite director of all time, it's Steven Spielberg, and his best movie is, in my opinion, easily E.T. Number 8 on this list, and also our first animated film, How to Train Your Dragon. What more can I say about this movie? It's just a cult classic. It has a place in my heart. So intimate, such a small story, and it's really just everything to me. The score, the animation, the cinematography, the voice acting, it's all just so much. It's not really doing a whole lot just as a story standpoint, but what it's doing and how it's doing it is what makes it just that much better. I can't think back to a moment of me being alive and How to Train Your Dragon just not being there. It's a movie that's really just always been in my life, and it always will be until the day I die. Next up on this list is Ikiru, 1952, from Akira Kurosawa. Whenever I'm asked what's the greatest film ever made, I don't really ever have an answer. But if there was one movie that I can say, this is the greatest film to ever exist, it's Ikiru from Akira Kurosawa. No film, I think, has been done like this movie and on this scale. And from one of the greatest directors to ever touch a camera, Ikiru from Akira Kurosawa is truly his masterpiece. As much as I love Throne of Blood and Seven Samurai from Akira Kurosawa, nothing will ever come remotely close to Ikiru for a very, very long time. And for number 10 on this list, I had to throw in just some kind of Christopher Nolan film, even a little bit. He's not my favorite director of all time, but he's definitely up there, and he just had a very heavy chokehold on my development in being a film buff and a film bro and a cinephile, so I had to give him some kind of love. But shouting Christopher Nolan out is one thing, but picking between one of his masterful movies is an even bigger challenge. I could have gone with Interstellar, could have gone with The Dark Knight, Batman Begins, Tenet, or even Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer just came out last year, but I still think it's a masterpiece. But even though all of those films are great, no movie felt so right to throw in here than Inception from Christopher Nolan. Inception is one of my favorite Nolan films. It's tied in my top 1 for a lot of very valid reasons. The biggest one is its story. I know that everyone's always talking about the scale and scope of a Nolan film, but at its core, what he does with these characters is nothing short of excellent. Visuals are incredible, the IMAX is incredible, the sound design is everything, the score from Hans Zimmer being just one of the greatest and most iconic scores of all time in this film is incredible. I just can't really get enough of this director. Christopher Nolan, thank you, and everyone else involved in this film, thank you. It's a masterpiece, 5 out of 5. So Inception was our number 10, and for our number 11, from a director who is definitely one of my favorites of all time, a director who is so young, but definitely the definition of a prodigy, Damien Chazelle's La La Land is a true masterpiece. For a very long time, even though I said I don't have a favorite film, if someone ever asked me, Logan, what's your favorite film? For about 5 to 6 months, my only answer was La La Land, by no doubt. I know La La Land has a very heavy cult following right now, already a classic, already a cult classic, and everyone loves this movie. It's all anyone talks about on film Twitter and film Instagram and film talk. No one can shut up about La La Land and the very tragic ending that emotionally destroys you. But rightfully so. It's starting to become just a cliche movie like your Godfather, like your Interstellar, movies that you just can't stop hearing about, and it's so annoying at that point. But La La Land truly is just that good. It's that good of a film. It's with Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone performing at their absolute best, Damien Chazelle just really directing the crap out of this film, Justin Hurwitz having just a incredible, masterful, emotionally shattering score in this movie. He just truly went out there and put out an absolute masterpiece, one of the greatest films of the century, and really of all time. La La Land, Damien Chazelle, thank you. Maybe should have won Best Picture. We'll talk about that another time. Number 12 on this list, our second animated movie, The Lion King, 1994. Just watched it before recording this episode. It's still a masterpiece, 5 out of 5. If you were a kid at all below the age of 4, 5, whatever, you watched this movie at least 10 times a day for about 3 years, and you loved it on every single watch. Beautifully animated, beautifully scored. Hans Zimmer, again, on this list, one of the greatest composers of all time. Nope, he's not one of the greatest. The number 1 GOAT of all time composer. in this movie, I think, just put out an absolute breathtaking, masterful score. I listen to the score about once a week, and rightfully so, it's absolutely incredible. But besides the score from Hans Zimmer, incredible animation, the story is really good, adapted from Hamlet, and just truly, I think, very well adapted to the big screen. Number 13, I have Logan because, well, it's literally me. It's Logan. Why wouldn't I have Logan in here? Hugh Jackman's one of my favorite actors. The Wolverine is just one of those characters that had just a very big impact on my childhood. And this movie is an incredible ending to the character. That's why right now I'm really hesitant on a Deadpool 3. Bringing back Hugh Jackman, it could be a big mistake. I don't really know about that. But besides that, whatever they decide to do, Logan will always be the definitive ending for this character for me, and it just couldn't have been more perfect. It couldn't have been more perfect of a neo-Western movie. It's just truly incredible. Haven't seen it in about like 4 or 5 years, but I still love it more than life itself. Logan's number 13, but for number 14, I have Manchester by the Sea. Talked about it in my January recap episode. Manchester by the Sea is really everything. This is just one of the best dramas ever made, one of the best performances from Casey Affleck. When you talk about guilt and trauma in movies, it can feel a lot of the time kind of not done in the right way or just not done in a very cohesive or entertaining way by any means. This movie, Manchester by the Sea, takes grief and trauma and brings it to a just completely different level and making it just a more realistic representation of those traits. Now, that being said, it is a just more realistic interpretation of guilt and trauma, which is what makes it just so good and also just so sad to watch because it's not going the way you want it to go. I'm going to try not to spoil it. If you have seen Manchester by the Sea, you know how good it is. If you haven't seen Manchester by the Sea, what are you doing? Go check it out like right now. For number 15, I have Moonlight from Barry Jenkins. Back in 2020, I was trying to watch more movies. That's when I started my journey on becoming a cinephile, watching a lot of different movies, a lot of different films. Moonlight from Barry Jenkins was one of those movies, and this truly is a masterpiece, one of the greatest coming-of-age stories ever made. I feel like this film is starting to become a little bit overlooked. I know it came out in 2016, the same year as La La Land, and one of these two films is clearly taking up a lot of the spotlight, and you know which one I'm talking about. Moonlight, you can argue, is better than La La Land. I'm not going to make that argument, but you could say it is. This movie is extremely well crafted and just so incredibly well acted and just so well done. The score, the cinematography, the acting, the lighting, you name it, it's all perfect. This film is an easy 5 out of 5. Barry Jenkins is definitely the most overlooked director in Hollywood right now, and if you watch Moonlight or If Beale Street Can Talk, you can definitely see that I'm right. So for number 16, this is another movie that objectively is not that good. It's not that good of a film, but I did not grow up with Indiana Jones at all, by any means. My parents just didn't really watch Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or Indiana Jones, so instead I grew up with The Mummy. And The Mummy Returns is definitely the worst from those two films, but The Mummy Returns, I watched this film at least 10 times a year. FX, TNT were playing it on loop for like 24 hours a day, 24/7. This film was on all the time. It got tiring at one point, then at another point I just realized, embrace it, love it, and I did love this movie. It's objectively not that good. It's not that good at all, but it's very entertaining, very, very fun. Brendan Fraser is my Indiana Jones, and he always will be. If I put Brendan Fraser in a box with Indiana Jones' career is going to be exposed, and his entire life will be over because Brendan Fraser will mop the floor with him any day of the week. You name it, anytime, anywhere, Brendan Fraser will be there to pack up Indiana Jones, and I will die on that hill. And for number 17, 2019 was one of the biggest years for film ever, and the best film from 2019, Parasite from Bong Joon-ho. This is, you can argue, the greatest film from the century so far. This film is really everything to me. I love it so much. The reason being, this film wasn't my first foreign film ever, but it was definitely the one that showed me what this world of cinema can be, and that there's just so many films that are on par with Parasite or even better than Parasite. I mean, Parasite from Bong Joon-ho was the biggest film from that year, made a ton of money at the box office, cleaned up at the Oscars, got incredible reviews, and then you mean to tell me that this film is awesome and there's about hundreds of different films out there that are on par with this movie or better than it. It just was like a Pandora's box of there's so many different films out there. I had to watch all of them. And just now having to watch all these foreign movies from China, Japan, South Korea, the French New Wave I've been tapping into. I feel like all of that started from me watching Parasite for the first time. And this movie on its own is really good, but just for what it did for me and for all these foreign films that I watch, it's just really so much to me. It's so near and dear to my heart. And in case you may want to know, Logan, what was the first foreign film you ever watched? It was Ant-Boy. Ant-Boy 1 and 2, it was on Netflix. This film came out at the same time as like Ant-Man with Paul Rudd, so I just really was on a rave to watch Ant-Man with Paul Rudd. I ended up watching Ant-Boy 1 and 2. It's like German or Polish or something like that, but it's decent. It's actually, no, it's really bad. Don't watch it, but watch Parasite. It's really good. And number 18, our third animated film on this list, I have Ratatouille from Pixar. This movie, I think, is the best Pixar film. I have to rewatch all of them, but I think that for right now, there's no film that's coming close to Ratatouille. I think that everything that makes Pixar great is in this movie. One, beautiful animation, beautiful score, incredible characters, incredible themes, and also just making a story not only for kids, but for adults. I watched this film when I was maybe like, 5, 6, and even if I watch it today when I'm 20, I know that this film is incredible and it's going to get another set of 5 stars from me because it's just that good. And especially at a time in my life when I'm trying to figure out what I want to do forever, it's just so good to watch a movie that's diving into your passion and what you love to do and doing it no matter what. Ratatouille is that film for me and always will be. I can't get enough of it. Can't thank Pixar enough for this banger and for all of their other bangers because they truly are, at least at one point, the best animated studio in the world. Now for number 19, I would say this film isn't objectively that good, but I would say that if it wasn't Transformers Dark of the Moon, the greatest action film ever made, this movie is just everything. It's the ultimate Transformers movie, the ultimate action movie. Transformers Dark Side of the Moon is incredible. That's all I have to say. I'm speechless even years after watching this movie. This is just one of my best theater experiences of all time, and it always will be. Michael Bay's Transformers movies was really all I watched growing up, and this being the best one had to have a place in this list. Transformers Dark of the Moon. I just can't get enough of this movie. I can't say enough about it. No matter what I do or what I say, it will never do this film justice. It's truly incredible. It's an experience to be had, not something to explain. Go watch Dark of the Moon. It's the best action film ever made. And number 20, rounding out this list, once again in alphabetical order, I have The Truman Show. Jim Carrey's probably second best performance. I would say it's his best, but Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind takes the number 1 spot for Jim Carrey. But this film is equally as good as that movie, and I truly love The Truman Show, not only just for what it is, but just for how relevant it still is today. It's a film about a guy who, is broadcasted on TV his entire life and doesn't truly know it. I think that can speak a lot of volumes to today's generation just with social media, Facebook, Instagram, MySpace, TikTok, especially right now, whatever it is, all social media platforms, I feel like is starting to emulate what The Truman Show is really going against. And it's just really deep, very emotional, very thematically rich. And another film that's definitely a cult classic, but I feel like recently, so many people have been just showing so much love to The Truman Show, and rightfully so. It's really incredible, but I just love the love that's been getting recently. I can never get enough of this film. It's incredible. So those are 20 of my favorite films of all time. You can find all of those in the show notes down below and also on my letterbox. Before we go, I'll do a quick one-time recap of all these movies. Number 1, 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Amazing Spiderman, Avengers, Blade Runner 2049, Cinema Paradiso, Diary of Wimpy Kid, E.T., How to Train Your Dragon, Ikiru, Inception, La La Land, The Lion King, Logan, Manchester by the Sea, Moonlight, Parasite, Ratatouille, Transformers Dark of the Moon, and The Truman Show. All of those respectively in alphabetical order, not ranked whatsoever, because that would be just absolutely impossible. Well, thank you to everyone for all the birthday wishes and taking time out of your day to listen to this episode. If you love what we're doing, leave a review, share it. It's the number one way for our show to grow and find more lovely, lovely people like you. There's a lot coming from the podcast. Next week, we have Dune coming in, the best film of the year. I'm going to try to tap into Dune Part 1 before then, so maybe next week, Wednesday, hopefully, if I don't miss another deadline. I'd love to talk about Ted the TV show before the month ends. I've just been trying to find a way to squeeze in that episode. It's really difficult. Also, the Avatar live action show comes out this week, which should be an absolute treat. I can't wait for that. And so much more from this entire year. If you want to stay up to date with everything Court of Cinema, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere you find social media, and also me on Letterboxd. Until next time, stay swagged out, stay cool, watch more movies, and I'm your host Logan, and I'll see you in the movies.